Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spirit School. I'm very excited for the podcast episode today because I am interviewing my mentor, Dominic Boag. How are you, Dominic?
Danielle, I am very well. Thank you so much. How are yourself?
I'm doing amazing. I think we've discussed I have allergies, but other than that, I'm like living the grand life. So thank you so much.
Living the dream.
Living the dream, exactly. So I first found Dominic actually through an interview he did on We Don't Die Radio. That's when I first heard about you, and I was really drawn to you, and I ended up getting a reading with you last year. You brought through my cat, you brought through my grandmother, and I really enjoyed your style of mediumship. So I approached you for some mentorship as I was coming out of my grief and wanting to get back into doing readings. And you've been with me for a year. You've been so incredible on my journey. So I just really wanted to share you with the audience. Do you just want to share a little bit about you, how you serve the world of spirit and people, and where you live, all that fun stuff?
That's all the boring stuff. Well, of course, as you say, my name is Dominic, and I am based in a small town on the west coast of Scotland, so over here in the UK. And I have been working as a medium since I was 16 years of age. I started unfolding my mediumship when I was 14. I spent 2 years really harnessing my relationship with the spirit and really just getting to know who Dominic was as a medium and what really mediumship was. And from there, I've went from public demonstrations, private readings, and exactly as you've just said, it's one of my passions, which is helping others unfold their mediumship and really take it to the next level for their private readings or for their demonstration, wherever they're going. And that's really taken me all over the world, from touring all over America at the age of 20, from 1 week. It's hard to believe I went to the States for 1 week, and now it's turned into nearly 6 months of the year. So very privileged, very, very blessed to be able to do this work for the spirit world, and most importantly, just to help heal hearts and reunite families along the way through the gift of mediumship. So yeah, it's been a wonderful journey. It's been an interesting journey, and it's been a journey of kicking and screaming as well, let me tell you. But it's been good, and I'm pretty sure yourself and many of your followers will probably relate. I wouldn't do anything else. I couldn't envision myself doing anything else now that I'm halfway there, in a sense. You know, I turn 30 next year, so you can do the maths, and it's been a blessing. It really has.
Yes, I mean, I have so many questions because, you know, I know you're celebrating 30 coming up. So you have literally been doing mediumship for over half your life. And that's a pretty phenomenal thing to consider.
Makes me feel old now, actually, when you say half of your life, you've been talking to dead people.
Yeah, well, and you know, mediumship first came to my awareness when I was 14. It was when I first became aware of Sylvia Browne and John Edwards through Montel Williams, and of course the Crossing Over TV show. And I often wonder what my life would have been if I had followed those nudges back then. But of course, it just worked out perfectly at 31 that things unfolded for me. But watching some mediums who come into their gifts younger, just using like yourself and Tyler Henry, Monica the medium, one thing I have always seen and wondered about is just the level of confidence these young mediums have. And I wonder if you have anything to say around that, because I guess my theory, which could be very inaccurate, is, you know, by the time I was 31, I was kicked around by life quite a bit and had been through a divorce and like, you know, traumatic childbirth and all these different experiences. And it took me a while to build my confidence into mediumship. Do you think it helps being younger stepping into this just from a confidence lens, or do you just think that's just an individual journey?
You know, we could look at it from both perspective, individuality, and looking at, you know, just youth itself. Personally, I would say, being so young, I was I guess you could say I wasn't tainted in life in a sense. I didn't have any worries of if any peers or if anyone's going to judge me. You know, I was still at school, so I didn't have any pre-plan of becoming a medium. And I really don't care what anyone says, but you know, people don't just jump out of bed one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to be a psychic medium." You know, there's the spirit put you on that journey, whether it's when you're 14 years of age or whether it's when you're 40 years of age. You see, it's all about divine timing and when that soul is ready to answer that call of the awakening. But yeah, you know yourself, when you're young, when you're still in school, and when you don't have a care in the world, you really don't. And for me, well, it unfolded very, very naturally, is what I would say, and it was through a sudden death of losing my father. And that was the first death that I had truly ever experienced. And after that, you know, the mediumship really began to unfold. The spirit, you know, really made their self known, and I began that journey very willingly, very willingly. And I guess we could say curiosity killed the cat, because these weird and wonderful things that started to take place in my life then really had me question, you know, what was going on. Am I mentally sick? Is there something more? Am I really seeing people? Can I hear the voice? What is going on? And I just, you know, threw caution to the wind and walked through the Spiritualist Church door, and things took off from there. So being young, I truly do believe that in some way we don't have any pressure of needing to be logical thinking or be an adult, as you say, be a wife. Nowadays, being a mother takes a lot to let go of that baggage and really believe in what you are going through as a journey as a medium. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, because this is the first time I've been able to even talk about this, because you're the first interviewer with this path. And I'm curious too about those early years, and, you know, about the loss of your father and then you stepping into this. How was your mom? What was her role as you're developing this? Was she like a momager? Was she really supportive? What was that like within your family?
It's very, very weird, because even before my father passed, it's later now in life that I realized, but I was always very intuitive. I was always very psychic before I became mediumistically aware. And I remember, you know, a few years before I really went into my mediumship, I was sitting with my mum. We were just carrying on. I was sitting on her lap. I was maybe 10 years of age, and she had this gold chain with this little crystal ball on it that you could spin. And I sat and I was spinning it, and I says, "I can tell your future, Mum. I can tell your future." And it freaked her out. She's like, "You know, stop it, don't be silly." And then, as I says, when Dad passed away, she went through grieving. I went through hearing voices and seeing my father. You know, he materialized as you know, as real as you and I. And that was my first encounter with him. And I went through stages of, you know, did I just miss my father so much that maybe I willed that, or maybe I imagined it? I went through a lot of questioning, probably my skeptical mind, I guess. But I didn't tell my mum. I didn't want to tell her what was going on. Did she think I was crazy? I just didn't want to take her to that place. And I knew that she needed to heal. I knew she had to go through this. But months after Dad passed, she actually went to our local Spiritualist Church. And the medium that evening had actually brought forward a communication from my father. And it was wonderful, great evidence, really true to the point, down to the actual address that my father had been found passed away. So, you know, it really opened my mum's eyes. And the medium says, "Your husband is telling me that your son hears the voices and that your son can do this." And my mum probably gave her a look of death, like, "Now you're crazy." And she says, "And he's telling me that I will train your son." So my mum came back that evening and she says, "Do you have something to tell me?" You know, and I'm looking at her like, oh, she knows I've been bunking off of school, you know. And I'm like, no. And she says, that lady, Baba, and she started to tell me that, my dad had came through, and that's when, in a sense, I broke down, and I told her the things that I have been experiencing. And after that, when I went to the Spiritualist Church myself, and again received a contact from Dad, and I just felt, this is home. This is where I'm meant to be. This person is basically seeing what I can see, hearing what I could see. It just felt like I could relate. And after that, I then started to sit under that mentor's guidance 3 nights a week at the age of 14. But my mum, she eventually did get on board when she actually started to hear local people say, oh, I seen your son and he gave me this message and it was so good, it was so clear, or whatever, it was. And then her friends would always come after my dad passed to sit and just to give her company and just be with her. They then started to ask me to practice on them what I was learning at Circle. So my mum then started to see it come into action and things. But no, it wasn't an easy journey with mother and son for my mum believing that her son can communicate with the departed. But now she is a great support, and I like to believe she's very proud in what I do. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. That was incredible. So I suppose, like, doing the math, you developed in Circle for 2 years before you started working for the public then. And what was that transition for you? Like, how was that transition for you? Like the inner world and then also the outer world? Like, was there like high demand? Did you have to learn to balance school and mediumship? And then did you encounter any kind of like resistances? Like for me, I was very nerve-wracked going into public work 3.5 years into my development, because meeting that need was like at the top of my list, and it really ignited a lot of fear in me. You worked with me, you know how my mind works and the
Yeah, of
pressure I
course.
put on myself, right? Did you have any of that, or are you just like, I'm just going to show up and see what happens?
Well, in the 2 years of developing, I certainly wasn't going into school and telling my friends, hey, guess where I go on a Tuesday and a Wednesday and a Thursday. I certainly kept that all to myself in a sense. But yeah, I really went from 2 years of starting to develop, starting to understand it. And we were very blessed where we developed, because and one of those evenings, we actually got an opportunity to stand and to give a communication to, the public. And the first time I'd done that, I was like, oh God, what's going to happen? Is this going to be possible, or what's going to go on? Because it's okay in a circle, because you become familiar with people, you feel comfortable in a circle. But when it's the public, I just stood in my power, and to be honest, Danielle, I didn't have anything to lose, you see. So I just stood and I unfolded, and I maybe got to do that, once a week for 2 years. And then my mentor started to take me around different places here in Scotland to serve. And then before I know it, she says, now you're ready. And the churches around Scotland were then starting to book me. I was starting to take the services in my home church, and it really just grew. But I really started to realize, why, what's going on. People are actually asking me to come and do readings for them, to book in at the church to have a reading. I thought, that's crazy. There's other people, and she's been doing it for 5 years, and she's 10 years, and she's a professional, and I'm just, a little schoolboy in the early stages. And that demand just really got stronger and stronger and took off. But I didn't let it interfere with my social life, if you understand, with schooling and things, until some of my friends' mums were starting to appear at the church. And then started to see me. So slowly but surely, as maybe then I got into being 17, people then started to realize what Dominic truly was doing when he couldn't come out to play on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays.
Yes. Oh, that would just be absolutely wild. Like, invite Dominic over. Let's have Dominic over for dinner.
He might bring some of his friends.
Exactly. That would be so fun. I love hearing that. And something I get asked a lot in my own containers, because I'm 8 years into my journey now. My daughter turns 8 tomorrow, which is kind of like the signifier that I've been on this development journey for 8 years very consciously. And one of the things I get asked a lot is like, do you think you get better as time goes? Like, do you continue to improve in what your connection with spirit and the type of information that you can kind of bring through? Because you've been doing this for half your life now. So
Oh,
have you noticed a
absolutely.
progression?
If we look at what mediumship really is as well, of course we can only improve, but we will improve through life experience itself, because that's what we will use through mediumship. That's what we as a medium will relate to as the spirit communicate with us, as well as life experience in a sense. But I'm a true believer that consistency, so the more and more that you're practicing and the more and more that you work with the spirit, you've heard me many times talk about building that relationship with the other side, can only get stronger and stronger. And we've got to have a good balance. We've got to have an equilibrium of your normal life as a human being, as a soul living here and having an experience, also then having your life as a medium and constantly communicating. So we have to have that balance. But absolutely, the more and more that you practice, I don't even want to say your craft, but the more and more you practice, the more and more you become aware, the more and more you become stronger with the spirit. And I joke with some of my students, I say, I didn't get this body of a Greek god by just sitting at home and doing nothing, you see. It's like mediumship being a muscle. The more and more you exercise it, then the stronger the muscle becomes, you see. And that's the easiest way to describe it. The more you're in that power, the more you're in that zone, then the more trust that you will build with the spirit, and the more trust that they will build with you. So yeah, I do believe that the more you practice, then the stronger and the clearer the communication will become. Yeah.
I think that's going to help so many people, because on the development path, what I see and what I experienced is like this, like, I just want to be there already. Like, I just want to be there
Don't
already.
we all? Like, be done already.
Yeah. And really seeing mediumship as a science, not an art, because it is an art, right? And we all kind of have our own canvas and the way that we express mediumship in our own unique ways. But a lot of people do not sustain the path because it isn't easy, and it does make you look at your life and not realizing that the life actually is completely tied into the mediumship, right? We always get so bogged down with like mediumship development, and we're not doing the healing work, and we're not living our lives in ways that support the mediumship. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
And one of the most profound things that you said to me, it was actually in the reading, and I would love to talk about this because it kind of ties into how spirit supports us, and that building that relationship with the world of spirit is like when we hooked up, it was about 6 months after I went full time in my mediumship, and then I experienced a great loss. And in that veil of grief within myself, I just couldn't access that mediumship level. I was just like too heartbroken, and I wasn't able to give people what I was like used to. So I took some time off. But meanwhile, the podcast that you're on, like the downloads doubled and my audience doubled, and I felt this overwhelming pressure to perform, and this overwhelming pressure to like produce. And I remember saying to you, I feel like the expectations of me have surpassed my abilities. And you said, spirit gave you this reputation, right? So it's like putting all that pressure on me, like I did it, but you said, spirit gave you this reputation. And that was like a really big moment for me, because it took a lot of pressure off of me. Like, I created all this. Can you talk a little bit more about how spirit supports us in this, and how they like align things for us? Or what's your experience with that?
Well, we have to remember that as we build this relationship with the spirit, it goes hand in hand, you see. And although we have to deal with our own life, I always say to people, I was a human being before I became a medium, you see. So it's important to always check in on your own life. You see, how can you help heal other people when you're broken yourself? You see, you're grieving. You had to take that time for you. But just because you weren't necessarily connecting with your clients and delivering them messages didn't mean that the spirit world weren't working behind the scenes. You see, so they never abandon us. But when we're at a time of desperation and we're at a time of need for oneself in physical life, they gently just take a step to the side and support us and still walk side and side with us. But when we start looking at trying to be a performing monkey, to meet that expectation, how can we truly put an expectation on communicating with an individual? Well, we can't, because what we are dealing with is a personality. We're dealing with someone who's got their own traits, their own personality. They may be stubborn, they may be flamboyant, they may want to give you the world. We just don't know, you see. And when we surrender to the spirit and say, I am here for you, let me be the best that we can together, then that's all we can do. If you show up for the reading, I say to my clients, just trust that the spirit will show up, you see. And we can only give what we receive in that moment. We don't have a script. We don't have any intelligence of being able to build into something that can unfold so wonderful. We can only go into that space in that moment. But the moment that we try to perform, what we are doing is creating monsters within our mind, which then blocks out the spirit. Whereas if we just say, I will do my best, and that's all I can offer at that moment, the spirit world say that is 100% all we need. We don't need any more than just you offering your 100%. You see, and it took me a while to realize, they, on the other side, they are as desperate to communicate with us as we are to them. So if they have one opportunity to communicate with their loved one who have came for a session, then of course they're going to do their best. But that best may not be you and I's best, but it's the best in that moment. You see, so as you've said many times, we are not performing monkeys. We just surrender and give what we can receive. But spirit never abandon us. They never. Even I've had students who have done development for maybe 10 or 15 years, Danielle, been out working the circuit, and then they've went through a loss or they've had children. So their mediumship practice had been placed on the side. You see, and it doesn't mean that the individual abandoned the spirit. Well, they just didn't have the connections the way that they did. It goes back into having that consistent connection, you see. So it gently just started to go back in. We start to, in some way, close down and focus more on our physical life and raising the children or running a business or even our health. But when they come back to open up and to ignite that fire within that soul again for that connection of the spirit, then they just show back up, you see. Because again, if you're giving your moment and you're allowing the spirit to have your voice, then of course they're going to do their very best to use that. So never ever think that the spirit will abandon you. Never.
Yes, I remember Googling probably about 3, maybe 4 years into my development journey. I'm like, did spirit leave me? Am I being punished? Because I was going through so many insane life changes. And I used to use the word disconnected. A lot of people use, I'm disconnected. I really don't like that word because it feels so like definite. You know what I mean? It's like the severing. And I don't believe we can be disconnected from spirit. I don't believe we can be disconnected from anything, to be honest with you. It's like energy, which is like ever flowing, consistent, right? But I remember Googling that and I came across a blog that basically talked about, sometimes you have to focus on life. Like you're meant to like kind of like focus on life, and they do kind of step to the side every once in a while so that you can be human, because it does support you in your mediumship as well. And one thing I experienced and we talked through recently in the mentorship was how when I came back to do mediumship for the public again, outside of even a practice setting, how much my mediumship had changed.
Yeah.
For some reason in my mind, the mindset is kind of like change is bad. but really the mediumship improved in so many ways from that big break, and being transformed through grief, because it was my first time ever experiencing grief as well. Have you experienced any of that?
Well, like we've discussed, and we discussed it very recently, is until death really touches your life, then you don't really know what it means to receive the gift of communication from a medium. You see, some people will never truly embark on a spiritual awareness or even having belief in life after death until they have death knock on their door. And, that's a sad thing, and that's okay. But when we are going through changes ourselves in life, what the spirit world will be doing is having us look inwards. And they will point things out, and they will bring our awareness to certain things ever so slightly, so subtle, that then show us. And that's where it comes into personal development and personal growth with the soul and how we move forward. So then when you and I met and we started to look at your mediumship, what you actually were understanding is what mediumship truly means to Daniel now, and what communicating with spirits for clients, what it really means. So we reanalyzed your mediumship, we built a new foundation, and we just looked at it from a different perspective. So for me, even in life today, as you like to remind me, half of my life communicating with the spirits, there has been multiple changes. When I first began communicating with spirits, my clairvoyance was so good. I could see the spirit right down to the Mickey Mouse belt that he was wearing, or the description of the sneakers. He had two blue eyes, and one was a little bit foggy. I could really see. And even when it came to audiences, I could see where the spirit would stand. You see? But then when I was 18, I was struck down with a rare condition that actually made me lose my sight over a very quick period of time. So I actually only have 20% of vision. So I had to analyze my whole life. My whole life was crashing down in front of me. My dreams were basically all over. And I went into a few months of depression where I says to the spirit, no more. How could you do that to me? Why me? So I had to then reanalyze my life, and not once did they abandon me. I always became aware of them, but I shut them off. But then I realized how much I needed them, because I kept getting people asking me, can you do a reading? Can you do this? Can you do this? I need this. But also having feedback coming with readings that had affected people's life and how that changed their life as well. So I reflected of saying, Dominic, you've still got a life, you can still do other things, there's worse things that could happen, pick yourself up, put your big boy pants on. And I've had to bounce back, but they helped me do that. They helped me go inwards first to see the beauty that I still had in life, to then start bringing back into this world.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I appreciate that. One thing I want to touch on, because it's fascinating to me, clairvoyance is an enigma to me, right? Because I love clairsentience. I'm like, it is what it is. It's just like, it's factual to me. It's like, you can't make up an emotion. You know what I mean? Like it's very like real to me and accurate. So I love my clairsentience, but clairvoyance, it's like 50-50. I'm like, if it's my imagination or if it comes from spirit, because the discernment isn't that great, right? For me with the clairvoyance. And you said something fascinating and I loved it, which was around, you see future events in color and past events in black and white or shades. Like, can you explain how you kind of like iron that out? Like, that's very detailed, but I'm a detailed person.
Yeah, no, of course,
I think people find that fascinating.
It all comes back to, me building that relationship with spirit and realizing that when I see imagery in black and white, so whether it's within my clairvoyance or my mind's eye, or whether it's things visually being placed around me. So I started to say, well, is this a memory? So I would then ask the spirit, this image you're showing me, is this a memory? And I would receive, whether it be a feeling or a clairaudience, yes, it's a memory. Your memory, yes. So then I started to look at the past. And again, I tried to be a logical thinker. Most things that we see in black and white are things that have already happened, if we look before we had the beauty of technology, all pictures were done in black and white. So if we see a black and white image today, we know that that's happened, that's then gone in a sense. So I started to realize through this connection with spirit that images I see in black and white would be memories from the spirit, things that they remember, whether it be the old-fashioned car that they drove, or whether it be images of an old house where they lived, anything, you see, anything. And then I started to say, so the in color, well, that's a more present feeling, isn't it? That feels more like things in life and that's vibrant. So how does this come into way? How does this come into picture? And when we analyze images, we have to pay attention to the detail, the clothing, you see, and the details around the images. And I started to realize that's in life. This is something going on. This is what they have seen happen around life just now. So that's something I started to play with, because it then allowed me to say, well, you know, since your mum's passed, she shows me that you have now got 2 daughters and one would have brown hair. Would that be true? Yes, I do. Things like that then showed me that's proof of life after death, because that's things that this spirit has witnessed since they have departed. So going into details like that through clairvoyance, I just find that absolutely fascinating, because it really does, in a sense, bring the communication to life for the client as well. Because if you go through this life grieving with horrible thoughts or images of someone's last moments, they're not always the greatest, are they? So if we can take that away from the grieving client and say, your mum shows me the time that you both were paddleboarding in the lake and she pushed you over. Do you remember this? Yes, I do. Well, it then actually replaces that dark moment, which is only a moment in their life. It's not a lifetime. It then brings in a healing. It then replays the life they shared together, you see. So in a sense, the clairvoyance can also bring the communication to life.
Yeah, I love that. And a really important word that you mentioned within that is that you had to play. You had to play around with it for a while, and to kind of iron it out. And it's something that I talk about in my 6-week program is like, you know, the reality of this is it took me getting some things wrong dozens of times before I started ironing it out and giving yourself time and space to be wrong and to like not get yeses all the time, to kind of like flesh out what some of this communication is. And that's a barrier I see to a lot of people developing as well, is like not wanting to be vulnerable enough to like play and just see like what is it that they're trying to express.
It's got to, you know, I says to you, I think I just said to you yesterday, you know, let's focus rather than the destination, focus on the adventure. And that's what spirit, you know, even every reading I do, you know, I have 3 sessions when I finish with you this evening. I don't know how they're going to go. I don't know who's going to come and communicate with me. All I know is I have a 7, an 8, and a 9 o'clock appointment, point blank. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm excited for that. It's an adventure, you see. And playing around with the spirit is where we learn. But if we are always 100% perfect, which I really don't believe we can be, if we are, then we will never learn. Whereas when we receive information wrong, we then go back and say, well, how did I get that wrong? What were you trying to show me? Where was I misinterpreting? Or what did I create? You see, so it's about having or allowing yourself to be wrong. You know, I say to you all the time, do not be scared to be wrong, because it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It could be you're misinterpreting, could be that the client isn't understanding right at that moment, or it could be that the information is just unknown at that time that could then come later. So just surrender to it, but go back to the spirit and say, give me something more that could validate that, or give me something else that could help point this information in the right direction. Have that relationship with your communicators. Be open to be wrong and just say, well, you know, if it's wrong, it's wrong. I do apologize. Yeah. That's what you can do. You're only human. But have fun. Mediumship's got to be fun.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of shifts in working with you this year, just being more courageous in my mediumship, going for everything I get. And you helped me. I remember even just a couple of weeks ago doing a reading in front of you where I was like, oh, dad sees that you have like new vehicles. You're like, what color are the vehicles? And make like forcing me to get like those details. And I was able to get it. It's just like being your own mentor in those moments, just saying, you can get this, like push for it. Like you don't be afraid to kind of get it wrong. And it's been really freeing for me. And the other thing I do notice, like what you're just talking about, is like I do wake up whenever I have readings on the docket now. It's like I get really excited for them. I'm like, I'm excited to do mediumship today. It's been this really kind of like beautiful year of unfolding and just changing so much, thanks to you just like pushing me continuously. Okay, it's time. It's time to do this now. Now I think we're going to focus the last little bit of our year together on groups and facing some of those fears, right?
And that's what it is, and that's the biggest thing. And let's face it, fear holds us back in this human experience in anything we do, not just mediumship. You see, whether it be roller coasters. I do not go on roller coasters. I do not go on fast things. I do not go on things I don't have control of because I have that fear. I'm a big scaredy pants. But I choose not to overcome that. I don't need to overcome that because if I don't go on a roller coaster, I couldn't care less. You see, so I don't worry about that. But there's other things in life where we have to say, this is holding me back. So let me just surrender and trust. It's the same with mediumship. Please do not be under any illusion that I first stood up and says, I'm coming to you with the lady with the blue jacket. I've got your son. He tells me this. He tells me that. Absolutely not. I had to start small, build that confidence, be courageous, and throw caution to the wind. I had to give myself that permission to say, well, if it's not her son, then it's okay, but it's her nephew then. You see, and then go on into the communication. Well, why did I feel it was her son? Would you understand that you raised him? Yes, I did. So I then realized, actually, Dominic, you're working with the emotional bond that spirit and the recipient had together. So there's magnitudes, but it's all about these learning curves. These no's give us learning curves. You see, so for anyone watching, the greatest thing I would say is allow yourself to be okay to get it wrong, because then you can go back to the spirit world and say, well, where was it going wrong? What did I do wrong? Because then you will learn. It's all about growth.
Absolutely. And I do think mediumship requires a lot of courage, right? Like going into a 9 to 5, like you have your expectations, you have your roles, you have your jobs, like you're kind of told what to do. And going into mediumship, like you say, you have a 7, 8, 9, and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen today, but I'm showing up and I know spirit's going to show up and I'm going to do the best I can. And it takes walking through that level of uncertainty and just showing up as your best self. And I think that takes a lot of courage.
Of course it does, and again, it's that will probably come with any profession as well. You see, you want to be able to do the best that you possibly can, and let's face it, we're providing a service. You see, whether it's from a healing point of view or whatever. You see, we're providing a service, and we want to be able to provide that to the best of our abilities. But unfortunately, like we said, mediumship's not an exact science, so we can only surrender and pray and, extend that hand by saying, I'm here for you. Come closer. Come closer. If the heart is open, miracles can happen. I'm a true believer in that, you see. And if the intention is right, then we just go with it. But we have to stop putting ourselves into a performing monkey situation, or I must, because in reality, we just never know. So be okay with that. Find your courageous side, find your vulnerable side. Mediumship, is good to be vulnerable in mediumship as well, because coming out of your comfort zone will help you become the best version that you can. Like yourself, when we first got together and I seen the organic mediumship that you could do, and you said to me, I just feel I could do more. I could go into many layers and depth, and I just don't do it the way I used to. He says, okay, let's start right back at the very beginning. Let's look at your mediumship again, and let's just take it further. But I had to take Danielle out of her comfort zone. I had to take you away from old teachings to show you my way of thoughts, to see if it could work for you. but you had to surrender to do that. You had to trust Dominic to do that. But
Yeah.
most importantly, you had to trust the Spirit to guide you in that moment as well.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. And, going back to even something earlier said about how we like kind of like change and evolve and stuff, like since going through that experience of like really deep grief, I actually attract and can hold space more for people in deep grief. Whereas before, because I didn't understand it, I would attract more lighthearted readings or just people look just kind of curious. And then this year, since kind of opening up and the game being kind of broken down and regrowing myself through my mediumship, I'm actually able to work with like broken hearts at a level I couldn't before. It's been kind of like this beautiful, there's that saying like break down to break through a little bit, right?
Oh,
And
it's very true. But again, like even for me, if I'm with clients and we are going through an emotional journey, an emotional part through the reading, I say to them, I just stare them straight in the face and I say, please break down in front of me if you need to, because I understand.
yes.
Because they might not feel comfortable around people to be that person. Some people try to be so tough and so strong for the family. They don't have that opportunity to just break down and let it all go. And I say, give it to me. Let's take that so that then we can replace those tears and the sadness with the beautiful memories and the messages and the communication.
Yeah. I
We've
love
got
that.
to break through. You understand that?
Yes, I appreciate that. So, what are some tips or advice or inspirations you can give to people who are just developing their mediumship? Like, what do they need to know? What are some of the most important things that they need to know?
The best teacher they will ever find is the Spirit, definitely. To go and see as many mediums demonstrate as they possibly can, because every medium will work in their own unique way. So it's good to go and see how people work and what feels right, what feels wrong. So just go and observe the world of spirit. And again, we've got the beauty of YouTube nowadays as well, where we can watch mediums from the past, even present mediums. But I would certainly say go and experience. I would stick to one thing. I see many mediums in development will try to jump from mental mediumship, trance mediumship, angel communication, whatever. Find what your forte is and find what your passion is, and then really harness it. And then if something else comes around, then trust that the Spirit have guided that. Definitely get into a circle. Find a safe space where you feel comfortable with a tutor that you feel comfortable dedicating time to, so that they can nourish you and guide you. But be able to get a circle so you can practice. Like I said, getting into that zone and building that power. If you can do that more frequently in a safe environment and space with people that you trust and feel comfortable to be vulnerable around, then you will build that relationship with the spirit world. But yeah, the greatest tip is just have fun with it. Have fun, and do not compare yourself to others. Don't compare yourself to other mediums, because the spirit world certainly don't want Danielle to be another Dominic, because trust me, one's enough. They've seen something ever so beautiful in you. That's why they started to build their attention to you. So let them guide you. I've seen so many students say, why does she get names and I don't? And why can he get the passing and I don't? Why? Well, let's look at what you can do. Let's look at what you are able to achieve, rather than compare yourself to other people. Because when we compare ourselves to other people, we then start to become robots. And then the natural, organic mediumship that's already there, we start to then manufacture. We don't want to do that. We want to just to flow naturally. We need foundation, we need guidance, but we also need to allow it to unfold organically as well.
Yes, I love that. And you're one of my favorite mediums to watch demonstrate. Truly. And I've gotten to see you on the Sandra Champlain's Sunday service. Like every time I get an email, Dominic's demonstrating, I'm like, registering, and you do demonstrations as well outside of that platform as well. So how can people find your medicine? How can people work with you? Like, how can people keep in touch with you?
The greatest way nowadays really is social media, isn't it? They can find me just Absolutely, by typing in Google. But just Psychic Medium Dominic Boag on Facebook. I'm very active on there. I post my events, I post my journeys, and I just, I try to be as interactive with the fans or the followers, whatever you want to call them, as much as possible. And for any of my events and private readings, they can only get all that information one place only, is dominicboag.com, DOMINICBOAG.com.
Yes, and we'll have links to everything below, so you can just kind of like click on them. Definitely check out. He does demonstrations and classes. And are you still doing a retreat next year in Scotland?
We are indeed. We have two. The first retreat sold out in 9 days.
Oh, I know.
So we're running that for, so we're running that for 5 days. Myself, Scott Milligan, and Josephine McKenzie. And because it sold out so quickly, it was only fair, wasn't it? I mean, let's be serious. It was only fair to then do another date. So we have another one in October, the same venue as well. We've been so caught up and locked at home for nearly 2 years, and people have been missing their development. And it just felt right now to try to come together, and that's what we've named it, Together with Spirit. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I need to come. Like Scotland's my favorite place in the whole world. I used to go every single year. I mean, people are just going to love your accent. I love the Scottish accent. And like, I need to find a way to get there. I'm so bummed I missed the summer one, but with the babies, I'm like,
of course.
But it's my 40th next year. So I do have a little bit of a leg up.
You're like, come on.
For my 40th, I'm like, maybe I can go to Scotland by
a
myself
gift
for a week.
to yourself.
Right. So I just try to save a spot for me, because I'm like, I love Scott Milligan as well. Like his trance is amazing. And Josephine, I got to read for, so love her as well.
You did.
Yes. And so thank you, Dominic. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast and get to share you with the world.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.